Cause you're listening to Jams and Tea, you won't see the show on your TV, so we talk about things musically. Cause you're listening to Jams and Tea, you're listening to Jams and Tea.
Welcome everyone to the next B-Sides episode of the Jams and Tea podcast, where we spin the jams and spill the tea. And today, this B-Sides episode is quite the special episode because we are covering perhaps the most famous metal band heard the world round that was phrased so improperly, Metallica. Only, as Morgan is demonstrating with his really rad And Justice for All shirt.
And also dogs.
Yeah, we are talking about the discography.
This dog is so loud.
We're talking about the discography of the thrash metal titan, Metallica. And today we're just kind of going to jump into this because we have been preparing
We're going to do their
for this for a
first
while.
five.
Yeah, we're going to do their first five albums.
We're doing
just because they have a long discography, and there are four of us.
yes, we're doing Kill 'Em All through to the Black Album today, and then in the second half of this, which will be a separate video, we will do Load through to Hardwired Self-Destruct,
Which
Including
includes Lulu.
including Lulu,
Yes.
which I am so excited to talk about.
Yeah,
It's
same.
such an interesting
boy.
album
I'm,
for a lot of
yep.
reasons.
I'm prepared.
Yeah. So
That's all.
We want to get cracking.
let's get into it. Morgan, do you want to
1983.
kind of contextualize us with
Yeah,
the knowledge of
it's-
Metallica?
Morgan is the Metallica boy here.
It's important to sort of go into Kill 'Em All with some context,
Yeah.
I think. So, essentially, this all starts in 1981 in Los Angeles, California. Lars Ulrich was looking for somebody to form a band with, so he essentially just sent out a flyer, and I think he was working with a record label called Metal Blade Records at the time, and he sort of put the word out through there that he was looking for somebody to play and write music with, and as such, he ended up meeting one James Hetfield, who would go on to sing and play rhythm guitar in Metallica for the rest of their known existence. It was after that they cycled through some people, most notably Ron McGovney, who was the bassist for some time, but not for super long before
Did you not on this very podcast say Ron McGovney? What a Republican-ass name.
Might have done.
I distinctly remember that.
Yeah, I remember it.
Okay. Okay.
This is confirmed.
But they soon kicked his ass out when they saw Cliff Burton playing in the metal band Trauma, most notably blown away by the fact that he was using a wah pedal on a bass guitar. And so they were like, we got to have that guy. So they got him. And finally, they met, Dave Mustaine actually joined before Ron McGovney. And then, all that happened. I forgot to mention that in the right order. I'm doing this off the top of my head. I'm doing my best here.
No, it's fine.
Doing good.
So then, they did that for about 2 years, just forming the band, writing songs, playing shows wherever they could, until May, I think. It was early 1983 when they went to New York to meet up with the record label there to sign their first record deal, under which they would release an album called Metal Up Your Ass, which was the first moniker that the Kill 'Em All songs would be released under. But the record label had some hesitation about that, which I find rather hilarious, because Kill 'Em All is so much more insidious than Metal Up Your Ass. For one, Metal Up Your Ass doesn't even make any sense. It's just funny. Kill 'Em All is really quite straightforward.
Yeah.
But at
I
any
wonder what
rate,
the album cover for Metal Up Your Ass would have been.
I think that it exists. I'm pretty sure.
It does.
exist.
Oh.
Yeah.
uh-huh. It's a
Right.
toilet.
It's
It's a
quite
toilet and a
interesting.
razor blade.
That's right. Yes, I've seen this.
Oh, it's so good. I looked it up.
But just before they were going in to record the album, they had decided to eject Dave Mustaine from the band, citing drug and alcohol abuse and violent behavior in the months previous to recording. Essentially, he was being a real douchebag, so they kicked his ass out. And it's pretty much the best decision they ever made. Nothing against Dave Mustaine. I like Megadeth. They're good. I'm just saying it's just better for everybody that he was in Megadeth. Yeah. The world is more prosperous for those two things being separate.
Yep.
And, to that end, he was replaced by Exodus guitarist Kirk Hammett, who would remain in the band for the foreseeable future. So, yeah, that's pretty much context for Kill 'Em All established. And in 1983, it was released. So,
yeah, what do we
want
think
to
of
start?
Debut, folks? Pretty good, I'd say.
Okay, I'll just come out of the I'll come out the fucking bat and just say I think this album fucking rules. I think it gets swept aside just because it's not one of the records that followed it. It's not the Metallica Holy Trilogy of Master of Puppets, Ride the Lightning, or And Justice for All, so it will inevitably be seen as lesser than those. But also, it's not the Black Album. And so, yeah, I feel like this maybe doesn't get its due despite being well-regarded. That said, just coming back to this, it's a very easy album to talk about just because every song fucking goes so hard. It is the purest embodiment of thrash metal distilled into 10 wonderful tracks, 50 minutes, decently short album, I guess, when you consider it in tandem with a lot of Metallica's other records. I think this has, I think this is one of the best debut metal albums ever recorded, in fact, just because I think so much of the band's best material shows up on here. Basic bitch take though it may be, The Four Horsemen is the best Metallica song. It is long as hell, and it goes for every single fucking second. You have Hit the Lights, which is such a great intro. It really gets you into it. And then you got shit like Jump in the Fire. It's fucking
yeah.
James Hetfield is a meme at this point. The man's delivery can be so fucking mimicked to the point where he sounds silly almost. But here he's got this young hunger that's not really present on all the other albums. It's kind of inexperienced in a way, but I like that it adds a roughness to it. You have shit like Pulling Teeth, Whiplash, Phantom Lord. Phantom Lord is a weirdly progressive song, which is not the last time Metallica will dabble in such things like that. But you also have shit like Seek and Destroy. Every single song whips. And that's all I gotta say. It's great. It's awesome, and it's easy to say why.
I've got some detailed thoughts I might jump into, because I really like this album too.
Jump into the fire, you might say.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that Kill 'Em All is a bare bones but energetic and surging rush of blistering thrash. Hetfield does sound youthful on this record, and unlike subsequent releases, his vocals are mixed more moderately, almost low in fact, so as not to overpower everything else. In fact, if the album has any weakness, it may be that Kirk's rhythm guitar doesn't quite pack the same punch as the drums and lead have comparatively. It still sounds great though. The solos here are cocksure, flashy, but never overly showy. It's exactly what you look for in the sugar rush metal of the late 70s and 80s. If there is a weakness to Kill 'Em All, it may simply be that the compositions themselves are not as consistently fulsome and full of surprises as their next few releases are. But that said, I think if you divorce it from them and take this album purely on its own merits, I mean, as I said in a previous episode, holy shit, this fucks. It's very good.
Don't stop fucking.
Four Horsemen, I'm glad to know that I'm not the only one that thinks that's amazing. I don't know if I'd say it's the best Metallica song, but it's top 5 material easily.
The best, not my favorite.
it has these chugging, pumping riffs that would come to define the Metallica sound, I think. And like the not dissimilar heavy metal of Iron Maiden, there's a sense of playful abandon in this track to the shifting extended sequences the song goes through, where the band are so full of ideas that they constantly change up the melody and keep the listener on edge. It's just an embarrassment of riches in this single song alone. The solo around 4 minutes in is just pure bliss, and it evolves effortlessly from the track's kind of stellar rhythmic center. It's a masterclass in musical metal construction, this song. I think you could analyze it and basically get a formula for perfection from it. It's my favorite track on the album. No surprises there, though not for a lack of contenders. Cliff's bass adds a nice melodic counterpoint to the riffage of Jump in the Fire. And the unforgettable opening to Whiplash is just one of the grandest and most memorable intros to a Metallica track ever, basically. It's something that I'm sure that they would have milked for all it's worth in the live setting, and it is to the credit of the band that the rest of the song doesn't fall short of that promise. Seek and Destroy is obviously classic Metallica, one of the most beloved songs of their early period, and one which I think thankfully holds up as one of their most purely fun bangers. Admittedly, tracks like Motor Breath and Metal Militia don't quite get off the mark in the same way as the longer pieces do here. They're still good. They're just, they suffer a bit in comparison, whereas you have a lot more, I think, consistency on the next two records. I think the only real dud here is the distorted bass wankery of Pulling Teeth, which I get it. It just doesn't really work for me. It kind of halts the record, I think. And I'm sorry, I clearly am in the minority.
You've been
there.
decapitated in the Coliseum.
Yeah.
Look, I'll accept it. It's, Cliff was obviously...
You'll accept decapitation? All right.
Cliff was obviously a tremendous talent, and I'm obviously going to talk about that more and more, especially when we talk about Master of Puppets. But But yeah, that Pulling Teeth just doesn't quite work for me. I think if I approach it as an interlude, it's a little bit more palatable, but I do kind of wish it weren't there.
It's their least good instrumental of the first 5 albums. I will grant you that.
Sure.
And the 5th one doesn't even have an instrumental, so that's how.
Yeah. I will admit, I think that the enjoyment level I've had with Kill 'Em All has fluctuated over the years, from my initial feeling that it was adequate to my kind of revisit feeling that, oh my God, this is amazing, to where I am now, which is like, it's actually pretty great. It's the thing is an essential piece of their story, no doubt, but I'm kind of seldom likely to reach for it over the next two. But that said, I really don't want the comparative preoccupation of this record with being fun to somehow delegitimize how strong of a debut it actually is. There's a lot of real meat on the bones here, and it deserves to be heralded as one of their, when people talk about the classic era and they kind of kick it off with Ride the Lightning, I think that's a big oversight. This is the beginning of a classic era for this band, and it should not be overlooked.
Yeah, co-sign that, because, I do think that I look at this from a somewhat different perspective than someone who did not spend high school playing in a thrash metal band. Because for me in particular, you can hear the passion and the excitement and the absolute joy of everything that they were laying down at the time. And it translates through to the recording flawlessly. It almost sounds like a live album in some ways, just because the energy is so strong and they keep it so vibrant the whole time. And to put it simply, it just doesn't stop going. At no point does it let up on the gas pedal. And whether it's through speed metal or the proto-thrash essence of the album, everything is compelling in one way or another. if you ask me, anyways. And yeah, it's saying that it's fun may sort of, I don't know, delegitimize it some in comparison to the records that follow. But in some ways, I think the musicianship here is even stronger than on the following records. And especially in terms of the guitar solos. Like, there's just, the following albums would progress on the sound and evolve it in ways that are obviously more valuable to the core of what we know metal as now, so that, would make them objectively better in some way. That's just a fairly...
I think the solos on this album sound great, but I think the compositions are more consistently fully formed on the next two. Like you've got some real highlights here with incredible compositions, like I said, Four Horsemen, Whiplash, and Seek and Destroy in particular. But you get, I think, just more of them in a tighter package on the next two.
Yeah, and I won't disagree, but my point, I probably shouldn't have said better, but I definitely like these solos more. Because it's just the everything in the kitchen sink approach. They're throwing everything they have at this album, and it just comes together completely.
Yeah, there is a real hunger to it, I think, that's kind of unique in their catalog.
Yeah. No, I definitely agree with a lot of what's been said so far. I do think it is an album not without its duds. I think Motor Breath is definitely comparatively not as strong as everything else we're getting on here. But what this album does, almost in a way entirely unique to it, is, as has been mentioned, just this kind of freshman energy that radiates off it. And I think Jake has hit the nail on the head with Hetfield's delivery in that front, in that his voice almost sounds squeaky. It sounds almost imperfect, but that's just what makes this album so fun, because it is taking a bit of a rough road to form a whole that is incredibly intoxicating and enjoyable to listen to.
Totally, yeah.
Can I say, I would like to point out to the viewers, in this video, when I talk about Lars Ulrich, which will inevitably happen, the Lars Ulrich in this video and the Lars Ulrich of the next video, think of them as two entirely different people. They share the same name, and that is it. Because I will say, on these first 5 albums, if you just take that, and specifically here, I think Lars's drumming is exceptionally fantastic.
I would say, I would highlight And Justice for All in that regard.
Yes,
this would be a close second for me on there. We can get into the way that the drums...
Ferocious!
Yeah, and I think this is a good point to point out as well. There's a difference between drum performances and drum sound.
We can get into the drum sounds on
we'll
Injustice
get into
for
this
All.
We'll get in. Yeah. Let's get there when we.
Because I just wanted to say that obviously the drum sound has fluctuated wildly in terms of quality, but I think that for the most part, Lars has been a consistently good to great drummer across their career. And it's just as a personality where he becomes, I think he's really fascinating, actually. I watched Some Kind of Monster last week, and it was really interesting, just to get a glimpse at him as this kind of really, because even in 2001, when it was when they were kind of deep into their career, he's still this kind of kinetic, unpredictable, very manic, I guess is not an appropriate word, but he just has this very kind of intense energy that no one else in the band has, really. Certainly not Kirk, for example, who is just the most docile guy ever.
It's the parts in between that are fucking with me. Yeah, I got that part.
Yeah, so I think...
Wow,
I think,
it was like he came to life right here
I'm
in front
hoping
of
that
us.
across the course of this lengthy discography discussion, we'll get to kind of, at some points anyway, touch on these personalities, because I think that they're really
Yeah.
interesting, and the way they clash is really interesting.
It's very
particularly
important
James and
later
Lars.
on.
Yeah.
They have not yet developed into themselves
Like, this
at
is
this
still
point.
the boyish sense of abandon and, like, we're going to put, you know, our fucking... I mean, we're going to call this record Metal Up
bass
Your
solo.
Ass. Like, they were... I think in many ways, Metal Up Your Ass would have been a better title for this debut, because Kill 'Em All is kind of just... You know,
It's a little stock, I think.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's not a
The
bad
title.
title by any means, but it doesn't kind of jump out at you, I think, in the same way that
The-
something like Metal Up
The
Your
album
Ass would.
cover is terrible.
Yeah, it's kind of shitty. I mean, yeah.
In
I love
theory,
it, though.
in
It's
theory,
nice.
sure, but like it's just so awkwardly amalgamated. It's kind of charming in a weird way.
No,
I think
but
it's
Kill 'Em All's
fairly-
cover though is awesome. I
I think
like
it's
the
fair-
cover they went with.
That is...
It's fine.
Well, that is what we were talking about.
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
gonna say,
Oh,
like, it's
I
not.
thought
good.
you guys were
I was gonna
saying
say-
Metal Up Your Ass's cover.
Whenever
which I think-
Metal Up Your Ass
Metallica-
looks like a Megadeth cover.
A good rule of thumb is that whenever Metallica put blood on an album cover, it's generally it sucks.
Ill-advised. Let's say that.
Especially if you
Don't
mix it
do
with like
that.
what looks like semen on one particular album cover.
Oh, it's not just looks like. It is 100% semen.
But
Anyway.
I wanted to bring up Lars just because it's sort of he's kind of like James, kind of became a meme, and he's considered, like, generally speaking, I only hear him joked about as like a bad drummer, and I just like that is
He's
not
really
true.
not.
He's great. It's just consistency, you know.
Yeah,
But
and people
anyway,
get too
he
wrapped
needs
up
to
in
get
the
his due.
personality. Which
What
is
what
not,
are our favorite tracks? I think
Yeah.
we should
Okay,
get to.
sure.
Jay.
Three. It's honestly difficult choices here, just because there's a lot of good material. The Four Horsemen, gotta give it to that. Gotta give it to Seek and Destroy, and part of me wants to be basic and say Jump in the Fire, but I'm gonna go ahead and say Phantom Lord because I really fucking like that song. I'll say my least favorite song is actually Metal Militia. I think the album does end a little weaker than it starts, and I'd give it a very, very solid 8 out of 10.
Okay. My three favorites are going to have to be Hit the Lights, The Four Horsemen, and Seek and Destroy. I'll say my least favorite is probably the aforementioned Motor Breath, and I will concur with an 8 out of 10.
Morgan.
Yeah. In descending order from 3 to 1, my favorite tracks are Jump in the Fire, Four Horsemen, and I cannot believe no one has mentioned this yet, the Titanic, the Monolithic, the Masterful No Remorse.
Yeah,
In my
It's a good
opinion.
song. It's a good song.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In my
Great
opinion,
song. Rather.
it is my favorite track of theirs throughout their whole career.
Oh
It's
wow.
interesting that both me and Jake have our favorite tracks on the first album.
Yeah, I would not have
Actually,
picked that.
I'd say Four Horsemen is the best. My favorite track happens, well, we'll get to that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
don't spoil it. Don't spoil it.
Yeah, I won't.
Um,
I won't.
Although, like, I think pretty much everyone could take a pretty easy guess at it. It's not.
Well, I mean, we
if
have
it's
the
the one
same
I'm thinking.
one, to my knowledge.
Well, actually, I might have changed my favorite.
Oh, okay,
anyway,
fair enough. Yeah.
Anyway, so Morgan, did you give a rating? Sorry,
I did not, and didn't give my least favorite either, which is notable because I have none. 10 out of 10 record.
Fuck yeah, let's go.
I adore
Okay.
it with every bone in my body. And if, just going to tell you now, this trend is going to keep up the whole episode.
What? These albums are good? What?
Very, very, very good. So, my three favorite tracks are from 3 to 1, Jump in the Fire, Seek and Destroy, and Four Horsemen. My least favorite track is Anesthesia, Pulling Teeth, and I'm going to give this album a very, very strong 8.5. So there's that.
boy.
Let's go.
So, and then we move swiftly onward to, was Ride the Lightning released the next year? I think it was.
Yes, it was.
Was
1
1984,
year
so yeah.
later.
Okay.
Paul.
So Ride the fucking Lightning. Holy
May
shit.
have heard of it.
Yeah.
Little indie record you may have heard of.
You may have heard of it, yeah. I might go first on this one if that's all right. I won't do this all the time, I promise.
There's not too much extra context to establish here. It was only a year later, and the lineup's exactly the same.
Yeah, it's just basically, for one, this is notably the shortest Metallica album. I think 47 minutes. And basically, it is in every way both an expansion of and where there is a possibility for improvement, there is improvement upon the already impressive strengths of Kill 'Em All. This is a fantastic album. You don't need me to tell you that, but it is really like such a compositionally, it's such an achievement and such a leap forward from an already impressive beginning. You start off with the staccato riffs and vocal delivery of Fire with Fire, such an iconic intro, immediately introduces that tension of the record, and the solo here and the solos across the record generally, I think are a little more finessed, exploratory, more fulsome sounding than the previous and well produced than the previous album. And that's not to say anything bad about Kill 'Em All. It's just comparatively, you get such more, I think, ambition here. The bass is a little more prominent here than it was on Kill 'Em All as well, which I think adds a real sense of depth to the record that highlights the compositions nicely. I think as well that Ride the Lightning is also probably the best that Lars's drums have ever sounded on record.
Oh, yeah.
They're propulsive, they're intense, they're never overpowering, crucially. This is a masterclass in metal mixing. You could teach a class on metal mixing with just the discography of Metallica and basically what to do and then what not to do.
That's the whole curriculum.
The full gradient.
Anyway, I think the brilliant title track is the first of many Stone Cold classics here. Where Kill 'Em All mostly stuck to a tight 4 to 5 minutes with a few longer pieces. Here the average track length is a little bit more adventurous, and the title track progresses at a generally slower pace with plenty of pummeling riffage and one of the record's most impressive Hammett solos. For Whom the Bell Tolls pummels with these groovy, pulsing riffs and obviously that church bell intro, effectively painting a wartime scene of these walls of artillery and blackened skies. One of the most doomy tracks here, a lumbering beast that instantly stands out from the pack, and maybe a song that might be a little underrated, I think, by some people, as much as a song on this album can be underrated. Then you get Fade to Black. So Fade to Black is probably a safe bet for the most, I have to pick the right superlative here. I'm tempted just to go with best, even though it's not my absolute favorite, but it's certainly, I think, the most accomplished, impressive, and generally moving in all the ways you want music to be song that Metallica have done. It's so good it almost feels like it's been beamed in from another plane. It's a true testament to the remarkable musical dexterity and development that the band had displayed up to this point in their so far fairly short career. I think the early period of their career generally features a number of these more forlorn, crisp, and haunted ballads. And they're generally, I think, more often than not, in fact, if not always, pretty fucking good at them. But none hit with the elemental simplicity of this song, which is like this hopeless yearning for death that doesn't rely too much on Hetfield's blunt lyricism to get the point across. You also have the lunging riffs and twinkling guitar that both kind of work in tandem to create this feeling of overwhelming sadness. It's a beautiful song. And it's, yeah. I mean, what else can be said about Fade to Black that hasn't already been said? Just so remarkable. And the record is not even done with you yet. Like you get two more, I think, tracks that are a little underrated as well. You get the thrilling thrash of Trapped Under Ice that brings the record back to its breakneck pace. And I think the most underrated song on the album is Escape. Which has this hooky melodic core and a really brisk 4-minute runtime that makes sure it really never loses steam. And that
There's a fun fact about to interject
Yeah,
real
please.
quickly. A fun
Please.
fact about Escape is that, in the most literal of definitions, it is filler on the album. The record label, I believe I'm getting this right, told them that they needed one more song, so they threw together a sort of Iron Maiden-y 70s, early 80s metal tribute song. And this is all to say that at this period in their career, they simply do not miss, because it's still an amazing track.
Yeah, it is.
Yep. No,
That's
that's
really great.
yeah.
And I did not know that about it being a last minute addition. So that's a nice detail that I think underlines how impressive it is. And that these two songs aren't quite at the same stratospheric heights as what came before and afterward is not a weakness, but really just a smart bit of sequencing that tightens the pacing of the album and strengthens the impact of the longer tracks, particularly the absolutely fucking stellar Creeping Death and the lengthy, multifaceted and exploratory instrumental, The Call of Cthulhu, which does not waste a second of its 9-minute runtime in providing a climactic denouement to an impressively tight and refined album. It's a true show of musicianship and compositional skill. That the relentless soloing on this track does not feel monotonous or overbearing, but rather carefully deployed and effective. The band are fully in tune with each other and with their songwriting, and the result is their tidiest and most economical record, and an undisputed genre classic.
Yep.
Thumbs up.
Yep.
I don't think you're going to be getting any Ride the Lightning hot takes from this group.
I should sure fucking hope
you
not.
I
certainly
cannot
will not.
imagine. I guess I can get into this record.
Go on, boy.
Because just what is so good about this album is that just a lot like their first one, Kill 'Em All. This album doesn't let up. It just absolutely refuses to let up. Every song, Fight Fire with Fire, Ride the Lightning, For Whom the Bells Toll, so on and so forth. There is not a second of it that is not memorable in some way, because really they're just writing a lot of their most compelling, immediate tunes on this album. There's just a relentlessness to it. Like, here I think we've got just such a great fusion of how Hetfield's vocals play off of themselves, because we're not quite to the Master of Puppets era where he's sounding a lot more like himself and almost parody levels, but we're also not at the not at the amateurish freshman Kill 'Em All vocals. We're at this great fusion where you can have tracks like Fight Fire with Fire and Ride the Lightning back together, two songs that vocally sound very different and yet are on the same record back to back, and they work so damn well. And let's not discredit Lars Ulrich on this album. His solos are just energetic. It's just I would go into more detail, but for the sake of time, I'm just gonna say it's awesome.
I mean,
The good thing about thrash metal, man, you can just say it's awesome, and that is succinct.
and everybody knows what you're talking about.
Yep.
We're all on the same wavelength.
No one's confused.
Fucking rules, man.
Yeah, if I may go right ahead. I do not wish to undersell just how much I like Kill 'Em All by talking about Ride the Lightning. Because I'm going to spend much of Ride the Lightning talking about how much of a extraordinary step up it is from the previous record. So just, bear in mind that Kill 'Em All is, I think, in my opinion anyways, just as good as this record, but in different ways. That said, the second the record starts with Fight Fire with Fire, with a sort of almost medieval-esque guitar melody, just right, I mean, it's right away, it's reminiscent of like, you know, a Rush cut or something like that.
Yeah.
Just something immediately like, oh, we're playing with stuff here. You're stepping up your game here compositionally and with ideas that you want to get across. And by the time that wonderful intro finishes, you just get your ass beat by this giant, unstoppable, uncountable riff that goes faster than the human ear can fully comprehend. And the drums kick in, and it's just the hardest shit anyone has ever heard until this point. And it's like, okay, we're doing this. This band stepped it up. And the song, from then on, the album just doesn't quit. You get into the title track, Ride the Lightning, which is one of my absolute favorite Metallica tracks. I think as much as anything can go unsung for a record like Ride the Lightning, I feel like this is a little sort of left by the wayside when it shouldn't be, because compositionally, in terms of arrangements, in terms of musicianship, in terms of lyrics, which is another thing, the absolute step up in terms of lyricism on this album from Kill 'Em All, which is mostly just lyrically about how, you know, you're going to kick some ass tonight. And that's about it. That's pretty much all the depth you get out of that album. But on Ride the Lightning, they talk about capital punishment and warfare and suicidal thoughts, and, you know, the story of Moses and Ramses. Yeah, it's just such an immediate storytelling step up, even if it is occasionally, you know, just blunt.
Yeah, and obviously they weren't the first like metal band to do like obviously incredibly depressing subject matter, but I think like a large part of the reason why I think metal gets associated with particularly this introspective self-loathing and sadness and the inner turmoil is because of Metallica. Because it's just a thing that Hetfield comes back to again and again and again and again on every album to a certain extent.
I mean, yeah, Metallica is very much so dabbling in like very heavy political subjects on this album, and it's and they make it sound awesome. They make it sound killer.
It's a trend that continues.
Yeah, on the next two as well.
Yeah, it just doesn't stop ever. Ride the Lightning is compositionally masterful. For Whom the Bell Tolls is anthemic and massive in ways so few songs in the genre, particularly at this time, are or were. And Fade to Black in the thrash metal scene is practically unprecedented. You know, taking that sort of time to sort of slow down and introduce more melodic and emotionally compelling craftsmanship, and it would come to color the rest of their career and the rest of metal as we know it for the rest of time. You know,
there's always like an attempt at another Fade to Black on pretty much every other record, and it is to the credit of these first five that like the other, you know, Fade to Black stand-in tracks are almost as good, if not as good as well.
Yeah.
Not to say they all sound like Fade to Black, but they serve a kind of similar purpose in the context of the album. I'm obviously talking about
no, I got you.
You know, songs like
I'm in complete agreement with Tyler's estimation that Trapped Under Ice and Escape go a little unsung on this album. Lesser tracks they may be, but on any other album, these would easily be top 3 material.
Yeah, like they're only lesser in
stuff.
the sense that they're shorter, is really it.
Yeah. Creeping fucking death, man. I think if at any point Creeping Death has lost its luster to you, it's worth looking up the 1989 concert in Seattle, particularly because of Jason Newsted's contribution to that particular performance. This was on a tour with... Nope, that is not right. Never mind. Thinking of a different thing. Anyway, great, incredible song. One of the best of their entire career. Again, compositionally and structurally, fucking words, masterful. Solos, musicianship, everything is great. It's not exactly rare these days when you get a metal song talking about biblical stories, but yeah, in consideration with what was going on, particularly in the thrash metal scene at the time, this was new ground that they were breaking, and it was fascinating, and compelling. I mean, I can't possibly heap enough praise on this thing, but Lord knows I'm going to try. Yeah, Call of Cthulhu as an album closer, I think, is brilliant, particularly as a closer. It's such an interesting note to leave the record on. Partially, I think, because you can't get any more climactic than Creeping Death, so they just sort of went in a different direction that would be typical of a metal album, and introduced a sort of instrumental titan of a song,
I
and
think
left
as
it
well,
on that note.
For me, the choice to put the instrumental at the end and call it the Call of Cthulhu after a track called Creeping Death kind of just evokes this idea that the song is meant to represent, like, being dead. Like, the whole record is really preoccupied with death, and then the final track is kind of like this, post-death, nightmare.
Yep. Yeah, it's fucking perfect.
Yeah.
It
is. I agree.
Yeah.
Shall we? Jake,
well, I mean, again, it's kind of hard with this era of Metallica because they're albums that are so good, and thrash metal is a genre that is so immediate that, like, how many times and how many ways can you just say, this fucking rules, and I, like, blast my car radio up at all the way up to, like, 45 volume, driving home to half this album. Like, I've done this, like, dozens of times, but, yeah, I won't front. Ride the Lightning is easily my favorite Metallica album, and I think it's partially because, like, I used to consider the 4-track run of Fight Fire with Fire, Ride the Lightning, For Whom the Bell Tolls, and Fade to Black to be, like, their best 4-run songs, like, ever, pretty much uncontestedly. Still kind of think that. But then the more I listened to the album, the more I discovered all 8 songs are the best one. No, that's like, it just doesn't it
doesn't stop.
No, like, you want to say it's like, oh, like I'll just be like, oh, then to Fade to Black, and I'll be like, yeah, but I'm leaving out Trapped Under Ice, and then it's just like, yeah, but I'm also leaving out Escape, and then you just get to the point where you're like, fuck it, the whole thing. And, like, I think it's so amazing how much more ambitious this is too, but it is no less immediate than the record that preceded it, which just goes to show you how they didn't overshoot their ambition fucking somehow. And they immediately go, like, they talked about stuff like soldiers and war and death, and the whole album sort of has this progression of, like, you have somebody in the electric chair at the start, and they die. It's kind of like they sort of go to, like, the fields of hell, and then they die on the battlefield again, and then they're, like, longing for some sort of salvation with Fade to Black, and Trapped Under Ice hints as this, like, these feelings of encroaching isolation, just sort of, like, also, like Tyler said with Creeping Death and Call of Cthulhu, like, you almost enter, like, a second death. Like, this album literally kills you twice and says, fuck you, I'm this good. Just, like...
The hounds of hell in the
speaking,
background there.
Yeah, which is perfect in a way. And Fade to Black is full stop my favorite Metallica song, just because this has everything I want in both metal, in music. It is a masterful composition that builds and ebbs and flows with this really, really audacious structure and then explodes at the end. And it's like, it's the kind of cinematic track that builds such a pristine picture in your head. You wonder what your life was like before you had even heard it. And then, like, I can't undersell. I believe this, like, Morgan will verify this. You guys, your thrash metal band, Torva, I went to, I don't remember which bar we played at, or you played at in Lexington, but you all did a combined cover of The Four Horsemen and Creeping Death, I think? Like the first half of Four Horsemen, and then it just sort of seamlessly...
Yeah, we definitely combined it with something. I just can't remember what.
It was either Creeping Death or Call of Cthulhu. And let me just tell you, hearing that live, performed by, any band, doesn't matter, but, performed by a good thrash metal band, I saw the face of God that night. Like, Creeping Death is maybe the band's most underrated song, just because it's not a For Whom the Bell Tolls, it's not a Ride the Lightning, it's not a, it's not an iconic song that is like people who don't listen
Rest assured, it is definitely that within the Metallica fandom.
Yes. Like, people who do not listen to metal know fucking For Whom the Bell Tolls, for fuck's sake. And I've listened to this album dozens of times, like, substantially more than any of their other records, because it is the shortest, but it is also the most, I feel, robust without feeling like it drags anywhere. It has so many ideas, it's so much more ambitious, and God, it's delectable. It is just so furious. It is thrash metal incarnate. This is the album I compare all thrash metal albums to. It is the peak. Nothing is better. Yeah.
Except Justice for All.
I'm gonna pretend I didn't hear that. Let's move on to
you know what?
This is where shit's gonna get real now.
I have some bad news for you, Tyler.
No. I like Justice. Don't worry. I'll get that out of the
Favorite.
I like all these albums too. Yeah.
Favorite
tracks. Least favorite tracks. Let's start with Tyler.
Okay. 3 faves are from 3 to 1. Oh.
So hard.
Okay, just going to do the basic 3. Ride the Lightning, Creeping Death, and Fade to Black. Least favorite track, fuck you. This is a 10 out of 10.
Yeah, boy.
Yeah. 3 to 1, Fade to Black, Ride the Lightning, Creeping Death. No least favorite track. You should be catching on by this point. 10 out of 10, perfect record. The record by which all other records are measured.
Okay, no pressure, August.
So, funny thing, I split, the way I picked favorite tracks was I was like, oh, I like all of these tracks. So I'll split the record up into chunks of 3 songs, 2 songs, and then 3 songs again. And then pick from those. And I came to the exact 3 favorite tracks everyone else has had. Ride the Lightning, Fade to Black, and Creeping Death. Least favorite track is Dave Mustaine, and I'm giving this album a 10 out of 10.
Another fun fact for you, Dave is credited with writing credits on the title track, and one other track, I think Creeping Death.
I will check right now. It is Call of Cthulhu.
Dave Mustache.
That's the one. Dave Mustaine.
This boy.
Yeah.
Oh dear.
Ginger boy. Jake.
The pressure's really on, huh? Pressure's really on. Well,
pressure's on. I've heard what you've said about this album.
There's no way you've been listening.
Well, yes, but also just because, favorite tracks, hard. The only thing that makes me waver in my selection is the fact that basic bitch take, but I do love For Whom the Bell Tolls a lot. But as heartbroken as I and that I can't include every song on here. I'll shove that aside to say my 3 favorites are Ride the Lightning, Fade to Black, and Creeping Death. And this album gets a hard 10 out of 10.
Look at that.
So
14.
I think this is now our highest rated album by virtue
Oh
of
my
the most
fucking
people
God.
having rated it.
Yes, it is. Yes,
More
it
than
is.
even
It's-
Verve's Storm in Heaven or whatever.
Yeah, or like
Yeah.
Francis the Mute. Must be close.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
'cause some people were little bitches and gave that 9.5.
Yeah.
Hey,
Wonder
Morgan, you live about
who?
8 miles from me. How would you come over here and lick my balls about it? Like, come here. Come here.
Do you not think I won't?
Oh,
God,
dude.
Speaking of licking
Wait.
balls.
that's hot. All right.
I'm really not sure that it is.
Moving
Okay,
on
so
to
moving swiftly
1986's
on.
Master of Puppets.
So,
Morgan, is there
Master
any context we
of-
need for this album?
Puppets.
so after Ride the Lightning, this is the point where I would say the rest of their life starts. You know.
Yep.
They spent the next year or so touring and writing endlessly with, all sorts of bands all over the world. And they came back in 1986 to release what is considered by many the opus of their career, if such a thing can even be determined with the first 5 albums of this quality, Master of Puppets. So, yeah.
Pastor of Muppets.
Killing yourself.
Like that, yeah.
Wow.
Morgan
I can't
has
believe
to go
I've
to
never
chemo,
thought of that
guys.
before because
Say
it actually
goodbye.
makes sense. Like, yeah. Anyway.
That's the worst thing I've ever heard.
Like,
And that
what's
one-
great about Pastor of Muppets and
Oh,
Master of Puppets
Christ.
is that they essentially
God.
like mean the same thing.
What?
My God.
My God. That's awful.
Shit.
That's the worst thing I've ever heard. Now I don't
For
want
This
you to kill
essay,
yourself.
I will.
I'll kill myself.
My God, this is like being unplugged from the Matrix for the first time. There's so much to think
Anyways.
about.
Yeah.
This album opens up on what is, I think, one of the greatest openings to any album ever with Battery. Battery, a song that just fully immerses you into Metallica's direction that has kind of foregone more of their speed metal influences in their first album, and now first 2 albums rather, and now they're just a full-on thrash metal band, and they're bringing the power with this song. It's holy shit, this fucks. It's so good.
I'm
And
tempted to
then-
say this is the most aggressive Metallica album, but I don't know if it is. Like, it's hard. It's a hard call. It's certainly, I think, the most
it's
aggressive
up
of
there.
the first 3.
It's
Oh my
either
gosh.
this one or the next one.
Yeah, exactly.
And then we lead into the title track, Master of Puppets, which is where now this album has been firmly established as being not only full of bangers, but full of crushing political commentary about the state of big business and corporations essentially owning you, and also the trauma and mistreatment of soldiers. That idea being more developed in songs like Disposable Heroes on this album. But yeah, this, it's the first Metallica album I had ever heard. And I played it on an old cassette tape in my car, and I kept driving rather than stop at school I just kept driving so I could hear
Fuck
this
That's
yeah.
how you
album.
fucking know,
That is-
man.
That's gangsta as hell.
Fuck yeah.
I was late to my first period, and it was the least I ever cared about that because
Fuck
this
yeah.
is amazing. And and that's about as good as an introduction as I can give it.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll go last on this one, I think, because I've gone early the last few times. I want to hear what Jake and Morgan think on this one.
Well, it's going to be nothing surprising
Yeah, sure.
unless Jake has something surprising.
Do we have a hot take?
Start talking.
Okay, look.
Start talking, buddy.
This album kicks ass. Pretty much as much ass has been kicked on the previous two records, which I have established I do really, really love a lot. And I love this album. I think it's great.
I sense a big hairy butt.
Really,
it's coming.
really just kind of outstays its welcome. Every time I listen to this, I'm just like, God, this would be flawless if it was like 5 minutes shorter. Because every song, with two exceptions, always feels like it lasts a little too long for my liking. And maybe I've just been spoiled by Ride the Lightning being a more concise, a shorter record that is that opportune length for me. But every time I listen to Master of Puppets, I'm considerably more put out and exhausted than I am from the other ones. Like, and that might be by design, because this is a, like, again, it's a violent, punishing album that absolutely assaults you. And for the most part, it keeps up that momentum until some of the songs just kind of drag on at the end for a little bit too long. Most notably, I just don't really think Orion is that great.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
Sick.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I don't think it's bad. I don't think that it is really. I don't even.
What
think
is
that
this
it's
shit?
Like, it's not even a mediocre song, but I think that it bridges between Leper Messiah and Damage Inc., which are really great. Like Damage Inc. just sort of like it's probably what would. It's tough deciding between this one and Kill 'Em All for which one I like more, because this one has the obviously stronger ending. It's just that when I listen to this, I always find myself thinking at a couple of points, all right, I've gotten everything I want out of this track. Let's move on. Let's go. Pick up the pace, guys. We're like, I want to keep thrashing, but this feels a bit much.
This man just told Metallica to pick up the pace.
You fuck.
I did, and they should.
I can't believe what I'm fucking hearing right now about this song.
Oh,
song.
boo,
Man.
fucking who? Everybody
Man.
else agrees with you people.
Man, I thought I was gonna.
This man.
I thought I was gonna be the
you
one.
know what? You just spat on Cliff Burton's grave.
Whoa!
You did. You.
Whoa!
Oh.
Let's
take a step back.
Hold up, bro.
Sorry, that was, excessive, but like, come on. It's all right. We're talking about here.
Real. No.
I thought I was going to have the one with the hottest take here, just because this isn't in my top 3 Metallica records.
It's not in mine either.
That's fine.
That
Morgan,
much has been established.
Morgan, you're going to be a little closer to Jake than I am, so why don't you go next?
Yeah, be that as it may, I still think this is a damn near flawless record. It's less of a step up from Ride the Lightning than an alternate twist on its ideas. It's more sort of atonal in places. It's more gnarly. It's almost more violent in a way. In pretty much every way that Ride the Lightning was morose and sort of inconsolable in some senses, this is confrontational and angry, and it's just, you can hear so much that this is an album written by people who are living fast and pretty much planned on dying young, Yeah. It's a brutal record, and it's none of that brutality sacrifices just how musically incredible the album is throughout. I mean, Orion could be 5-10 minutes longer than it is, and I'd be like, yep, this is cool. Pretty much I think every song on here is exactly as long as it needs to be.
At me next time, honey.
I did just at you.
But yeah, that was is about as direct as an at gets, really.
If the only way I could be more direct is if we were in the same room.
The sexual tension between the two of you right now.
Is it not always that way?
No,
it's
I
almost
know.
As good as it is. It's almost as good as it is between you and me, Tyler.
Yeah, that's fair.
I'm not involved in any sexual tension though, which is fitting.
I think that's of your own volition. So.
Yeah, I mean, fitting still.
At any rate.
So anyway, Master of Puppets.
Yeah. No, they were doing a lot of cocaine around this time. Chop your breakfast on a mirror. And that much is evident just because of how this is like the most album to ever album. And so much is packed into even 9-minute long songs. It's dense, but it's never heady or overbearing. And it's just, I don't know. This does keep me in particular from having much of an emotional attachment to it in the way that I do the 2 records previous and the one after. But that said, I still think it's pretty much flawless in execution, and I will listen to it literally whenever.
Metallica's Still Life, if you will.
Well,
I like that.
I
like it.
I get what you mean, but I think Still Life is a whole lot more emotionally resonant than this.
No, I just mean like in principle of it being like so untouchably perfect that you might have a distance with it, even though it's way easier to do it with Still Life, but that was me at one point.
I would say this is more Blackwater Park than Still Life.
Yeah.
And that Ride the Lightning is more Still Life than this.
I know that Lightning is more kind of overtly emotional than this one because of how like forlorn it is, but I have
also
more
why
of
I
an
prefer it.
I have more of an emotional response to this album, I think. Yeah. Sorry, I interrupted you, Morgan.
No, I was done.
Okay. Well, allow me to make a case for Master of Puppets as the best Metallica album.
What?
I know.
The first to do such.
Bold take. Well, I don't know if I can make a case for it as the objective best, but certainly that it's my favorite. It was the first that I heard in full, like August. In fact, I think this was one of the first proper classic metal records I heard in full. I heard it when I was quite young. In fact, like I think the title track is one of the earliest examples of metal that I can remember hearing and liking as a really, really young kid. And it's been burned into my head ever since, and it's one of my favorite songs of all time. And yet it's like, despite the fact that I know it like the back of my hand and I adore it, it's still not even my favorite on this record. Yeah, but this record more widely, I think it was a big gateway for me into understanding the personal appeal as well as the artistic merit of metal as a genre. And I think to date, it's unquestionably one of the finest, most engrossing and essential genre classics. In particular, a demonstration of the appeal of the rage of it. You know, it's really unkempt, but obviously it's compositionally tight, but at the same time there's a real kind of energy to it that's like really verges on being messy. It never gets messy, but like it's a record that's much more kind of, I just feel that there's a little more passion in it than there is in the last two. Not to be confused with energy that there are in the last two, but there's just genuine kind of psychological and emotional passion in this that I really connect with. Battery is obviously an iconic opening. It displays Metallica's relentless melodic thrash at its finest. It maintains such a breakneck pace that even the track's first of multiple guitar solos is barely 5 seconds long. It just keeps going. The energy of Lightning is retained here, but I think what elevates Puppets for me is that it's more wide-reaching album in terms of what it's going for thematically and sonically, and it pushes their sound to further limits while still thrillingly succeeding in everything that it tries. And I already mentioned the title track. I think it's one of the greatest songs in all of metal. It's a rip-roaring display of the band's dexterity across 8 consistently memorable minutes. There are so many hooks, both vocal and instrumental, in this track. The gorgeous breakdown halfway through manages to recall the heart-wrenching emotion of a song like Fade to Black, while the rest of the track captures the kind of shifting but pummeling violence of a track like Four Horsemen as well. You get like a lot of the greatest elements of those previous 2 records beautifully synthesized here. The band finding ways to improve their compositional skill despite the fact they had already mastered their sound. The oppressive thing that should not be chugs along relentlessly. The blistering noise of disposable heroes works as a continuation sonically and thematically of the title track, with still a lot of flair and character of its own. And Damage Inc. wraps the album up with some of the most aggressive playing of their whole career, really. I'm stunned that none of you have mentioned album highlight Sanitarium, which obviously
Great.
Obviously is a
good.
classic, beloved song that doesn't need our endorsement to be recognized, but it is amazing. It is a brutal ballad in the vein of Fade to Black, and honestly, I think it's every bit as good as that song. It's a little more direct in its approach than that song is, which means it maybe sacrifices a little bit of the nuance, but it doesn't really matter because it's just the effect is the same. The band know how to wring all the emotion possible out of their melodies and instrumentation. And even Lars's drums sound forlorn during the breakdown on this song. And then by the time you get into the most shredding Kirk solo of the record, you're just along for the ride. You realize that there's basically nothing that these guys are going to do that puts a foot wrong on this album. And all of this is without mentioning my favorite song on the album, my favorite Metallica song, Orion. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's not like far and away my favorite, but I think it's always going to be emotionally the piece that I come back to the most. It was aside from the title track, the first time I heard this album, it was the thing that really like grabbed me and pulled me into the world of metal, like from a world of more conventional rock music. And then over the years, I've just got more and more of an appreciation for the way that it fuses their softer and louder sides in the same kind of brilliant, genius way that Fade to Black did. The unsettling atmospheric bassy opening adds an emotional heft to a crushing doomy riff, which itself opens up into a more beautiful exploratory melody. The sheer command of tone and playful soloing here is as good as ever, and I adore the slow trudge of the incredibly pretty breakdown on this song. And most of the most impressive and versatile playing on this track is achieved by Cliff Burton's incredible mastery of his bass. And the track, I think, remains his finest achievement, and that it's an instrumental and doesn't even need Hetfield in his ballad vocal mode to provide a counterpoint to the instrumentation. It can survive without that, and it feels full. I often forget that it's an instrumental sometimes because there really doesn't feel like there's anything lacking here. The guitars and the bass just really speak to you. They have their own kind of communicative quality that's really, really, affecting, and it just gets right in there in that heart of mine. It just, there's such a communication through the instrumental here. It almost seems as though the guitar and bass during the second half of the song are engaging in their own kind of emotional back and forth melodically. It's really, really, really impressive stuff. I can't say enough good things about it. It's certainly, Not very many tracks by this fucking band of all bands can bring me to near tears, but this is certainly one of them. Yeah, I think Master of Puppets, as I've already said, is a glorious synthesis of all of the strongest elements of their previous two records, while still feeling like it's searching and moving forward and trying to progress in really interesting and successful ways. I think it's a masterpiece. It's
Awesome. It's awesome, and it makes you unhappy, but not in a bad way, in a good way. A
yeah.
good
And like
unhappy.
for all of our bickering and stuff, like we can all agree this is a great album, so that's all that really matters.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
There will be some more contentious moments down the track, I'm sure.
Maybe
Yeah.
even the next one. Who knows?
Who
Possibly.
knows?
Maybe not. Let's
Favorite
jump
tracks,
into our
favorite tracks. Who are we going to start with?
We'll revert to our typical order then. Jake, you can go first.
3 favorite tracks are gotta be title track, Leper Messiah, fuck it, Welcome Home, and yeah, least favorite track is Orion. I give it a very emphatic 8 out of 10.
I don't even
Alright.
know you anymore.
On
good
that,
Good that happened before Justice for All.
on that
This man gonna hit it with a
existence.
6, and I'm gonna kill him.
So, favorite tracks from this time, I'm going to go from my third to first, because my number 1 also happens to be my favorite Metallica song. 3 is Damage Inc. 2 is Welcome Home, Sanitarium. Number 1, and my favorite Metallica
Disposable
song
Heroes.
is Battery.
Oh, well, that's a good pick too.
Very good.
Either way, awesome. Least favorite track does not exist, and this album's getting a 10 out of 10. It's amazing.
Fantastic.
Yep.
Morgan.
Yep. My 3, in order of 3 to 1, is Master of Puppets, Welcome Home, Sanitarium, and at number 1, Disposable Heroes, which is just one of the best things they've ever done. And
Great song.
It's amazing song.
Being the best on this album in particular is an incredible feat. And just Jesus. And my least favorite track is Get Out of My Home, and 10 out of 10.
Your least favorite track is the final track on Kate Bush's The Dreaming? What? That's for our Kate Bush viewers at home.
So on this podcast, me
And
No.
Tyler.
So my 3 favorite tracks are Master of Puppets, Sanitarium, and obviously Orion. No least favorite track, and it's a 10 out of 10.
Yeah.
Oh,
stuff.
boy.
This is going
Now
to be
we
fun.
get to the... Now, Morgan, you've got some history to catch us up on.
Well, it's on his
Let's go.
shirt, first of all.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do. So, massive tours for Master of Puppets, as you might imagine. They supported Ozzy Osbourne on a U.S. tour that year. Massive stuff. But during the European leg, there was a bus accident that resulted in the death of bassist Cliff Burton. And as you might imagine, this complicated things. This is important to establish because I think knowing all this can greatly impact the reaction one has to Injustice for All. Because this is very much, as you might imagine by the title, a record written by people who felt that they had been wronged by the world, you know? It's just, Master of Puppets is certainly not a cheery record at any point, but this is, and Justice for All is even darker than that. Much of the recording process was spent with Lars in pretty much direct control of everything. And this resulted in newcomer Jason Newsted having his bass all but inaudible on the final mix. This has since been rectified to some degree by a remaster, which is definitely the version you should listen to. But I would say that there is not a perfect mix of this album that exists. Even like the And Justice for Cliff mix, I think that turns the bass up too much. It goes too far in the other direction and sort of muddies the album as a whole, even as it is already muddied.
I think I heard someone describe. I think I heard someone describe it as sounding like someone just playing bass over top of the original, which I think is
that's
kind
pretty
of
much what it is.
Um,
In the years to come, Newsted would basically just be mistreated by members of this band until he eventually left.
I think it's worth adding as well, like that the official kind of statement explaining the mixing decisions for this record was that Newsted's playing, I believe, was often in the same kind of often very similar to the guitar, to the point where they would kind of, I don't know what the specific wording was, but there was apparently a clash in tones that resulted in the decision to reduce the bass tone for the sake of the record, which I don't know, like that's the party line that Jason has walked and that the other members of the band have said as well. And I guess I kind of understand, because like when you do hear versions of this album that has the bass turned up a little bit, I do want to say for the record that I think the remaster is basically useless. It's certainly not worse, but it doesn't really do that much, I don't think. But I do think that like when you kind of get the vague vibrations that are the bass, what remains of the bass, it is fairly similar, I suppose, to what's going on with the actual melodies and rhythms of the guitar. So
but that is
the bass,
that is often the case, even on the first 3 albums preceding that. That's kind of how bass works.
I do think that Cliff admittedly though his bass playing had a little bit more character than Jason's does, and I think as well, not to obviously Morgan, I'll let you get back to your review and I'll save my thoughts, but I do think that whether intentionally or not, the mixing decision on this record, I do think ultimately works in its favor in a weird way. Like it adds to the effect of the album in a really interesting way that I think is seldom discussed or gets lost in the endless, talk of it being an injustice or of Lars having this kind of dictatorial, attitude, which may or may not be true. But I think that, there's, once you kind of just accept, the way the record was created and kind of try not to get too bogged down in it, and then just think about the music for what it actually is, I think that there's a lot to appreciate that perhaps gets undersold or not properly. People don't kind of approach the record, I think, in the right way. Anyway.
Yeah, all this is to say that this is pretty much where the Metallica group comes to a crossroads in terms of both quality and lifestyle. Things change drastically from after this point. But all of that said, this is, I won't bury the lead. This is my favorite Metallica record. Has been for some time. Arguing which one is better objectively among the first 4 is all but a waste of time altogether. They're pretty much neck and neck as far as I'm concerned. It's just a matter of personal taste. And for me, I think all of the context and understanding the mindset the band was in both influences the way that you listen to it and influences the decisions made during the creation of the album. Because, you know, on the surface level, this album does not sound very good. The mixing is just wrong. The drums are clicky and weird and thin. The guitars are overbearing. And as we've said, the bass is inaudible. But to that end, at least when you've listened to the record as many times as I have, which is, I'm sure, in the hundreds at this point, maybe it is sort of a Stockholm Syndrome kind of thing, but to me, this all suits the album's sort of ambitions and ideas very well, because this is a pitch black, deeply bleak, angry, and sad record in ways that almost kind of make it unapproachable. I mean, more than any other Metallica record, this reminds me of like the Downward Spiral by Nine Inch Nails, even as far as the production. Like this, it sounds almost industrial at some points.
I was gonna say it does the industrial thing as well. Like, yeah.
And this is the most complex their musicianship has been up to this point. It's almost to the point of being a progressive metal album in some ways. It's essentially just a document of people dealing with losing someone they never planned to lose, and how they dealt with that from then on. Just coming to terms with the injustice of it, and that on top of the sort of socio-political themes that they're getting at here. It's just like, it's written by people who are angry everywhere they look. They can't really find solace in anything at this point, whether that be through grief or looking at the world around them or addiction or, it's just such a cavalcade of things that should have torn a band apart and instead produced what I think personally is kind of their finest moment in a strange way. The opening track, Blackened, it's what a masterpiece. I mean, in my opinion, if it were not for No Remorse, this would be my favorite song of theirs. I think it's the most compositionally interesting thing they had come up with up until this point in time. The way that it plays with rhythms and switches them up in the main hook is fascinating, and it just, you're never able to pin the song down because it is always doing something different than you would expect from Metallica, and it's just so vicious and gnarly, even in ways that Master of Puppets, a notably violent record in and of itself, weren't. The title track that follows is a gargantuan compositional masterwork, in my opinion, down to solos and melodies and lyrics and vocal delivery. It's one of the most impressive things the band ever did, in my opinion. Title track is brilliant. Eye of the Beholder it's one of the more straightforward songs on the album, I think, but it's also one of the most compelling. It just, the way that it just chugs along and it delivers its hooks is just brilliant. I love that track, even though I don't have a whole lot to say about it, admittedly. But then we get to one of the band's most famous songs, interestingly enough, One. This was the first Metallica song I had ever heard. I think I was in 5th grade, and I was playing Guitar Hero Metallica with my friend. And after we had played the song on Guitar Hero, he showed me the music video, which was, at that point in my life, the most terrifying thing I had ever even thought of.
I thought that was what that was building to.
Yeah, it scared the shit out of me because, I mean,
understandably,
I can't really think of anything more existentially terrifying than the story of that song, especially paired with the video. But even then, it's still just really, especially in the last half, it's really fun to listen to. Like, my God, it just...
Yeah, I'm going to drop a really cold take here and say that it's the best song on the album.
Yep.
Yes, I wish I could dispute that, but
I do love Blackened as well.
Yeah, close second.
and there's one other I will put in the back pocket, but I think you know what that is.
I mean, rest assured, I'm going to bat for every single song on this album.
No, I thought this was where this was going.
Yeah. Just the back half of that song, I have heard it must be thousands of times now, I'd wager. I know it like the back of my hand, and if I just sit down and listen to it right now, I would get full body chills throughout. It's as Tyler said about Fade to Black, it's so good it almost feels beamed in from another galaxy.
Yeah.
Unreal songwriting. The shortest straw for me kind of falls into the Eye of the Beholder camp of being a little more straightforward, but being deeply compelling and energetic, and it gets across the vitriol much like the rest of the album does. And I think really, really great ways. I'm running out of superlatives, but you know, we've kind of been doing that for a while now. Frayed Ends of Sanity. If I have a least favorite track, this might be it, I guess. I still think it's pretty brilliant. Fortunately, here's a fun hot take for you. I think To Live Is to Die is the best instrumental the band has done thus far. Which is not a common take.
It is a great song that also has one of the worst transitions I've ever heard, 1 minute into it.
I would have to agree.
It's a bad transition, but otherwise, stellar song. I only bring that up because I made a note of it when I heard it. Like, I actually thought, oh, honey.
What is this, honey?
But it's a good song. It's a great song. Don't let me take that away from you.
In terms of progressing what the band has been doing to this extent, I think this is the most masterful step up that they had thus far. Almost to the point of being a little masturbatory, but I think, you know, that's something you kind of have to be at peace with if you're going to be on board with this portion of their career.
Yeah.
This is when they push the boundaries of what they can do. in terms of both the raw sound of the record and the music that they composed therein. And closing track, Dyer's Eve, easily my favorite closing track thus far in their career. One of their best songs, in my opinion. That song fucking rules.
I would agree. I think this is actually... Hang on, let me double check. Yeah, this is my favorite Metallica closer as well.
Quick note, Dyer's Eve is the song I was referring to as being the other one, I think, on this album that is just exceptionally great, because throughout Metallica's career, they have tried to write Dyer's Eve like 5 more times and never done it as good.
I like the kind of punk energy that Hetfield has on this. Like, it's kind of like a really vitriolic song. I believe it's like about his parents that he wrote it about. His relationship with his parents. And it's a very kind of like personal and just ugly song, I think, in a lot of ways. And a lot of the music on this record is ugly, very purposefully.
I think that sort of applies to the rest of the album.
But
if I may pull this comparison out of my back pocket, I think this is Metallica's Cornfield. Yeah, you like that?
I hate that I instantly was just like, yeah, he's fucking right.
That's the funniest thing I've heard all day, and I completely understand what you mean.
Tyler seeing the face of God.
No, I'm just like...
He's just trying to decide if that's stupid or really stupid.
Yeah. It's a reach. But, I respect it.
I get what he means.
Don't lie to me.
Well, I like both albums, and I get it. I get what you mean, even if I don't agree with it.
It's just, quality aside, they come about the same time in each group's career, and they are easily the most difficult, ugly, confrontational things that the bands had produced up to that point.
Yeah, for sure. And they're both very dark albums as well, sonically.
Yeah. And I think that's why I find it so compelling, is it's just, as much as it can be sonically compared to the 3 albums preceding it, it offers something completely different from them in tone and atmosphere. And I find it much more rewarding, partially because of the journey I've been on with it since getting into this band. Yeah, I've said my piece. And my hipstery.
Injustice for All is actually the best Metallica record because it sounds like
Morgan agreeing with Pitchfork on this is the funniest thing.
Well, agreeing with the Pitchfork reviewer anyway, it doesn't have the highest Pitchfork rating.
No, you're correct. Fair point. But agreeing with the reviewer at the least of this being the best.
Yeah, and I'm basically, my contributions are going to be lesser here than they were on the previous 3 records. I basically agree. I don't agree to the same extent. Like, it's not my favorite Metallica record or even my second favorite one, but I do think it's very good, great even. And crucially, you have to kind of get on its wavelength, really, because the first time I heard it, it was really offensive. Like the mixing and stuff. Now, I want to get it in here is that I don't know whether this mixing decision was purposefully meant to evoke what it evoked for me, but once I kind of clicked with the songs and with the tone of the album, it just seemed to make perfect sense. Like it's a record like that it's a cold record. Industrial is a great word. Like it's a record about, being falling apart and just being kind of like filled with this kind of brittle rage, and you just get that so palpably in the performances here and just the way that the record sounds. It's ugly in all the right ways. It's very difficult to describe exactly why it works, because there are moments where where I listen to it and I think, okay, no, like surely they didn't mean this, like what? And then there are like other moments where I'm like, okay, I get it. Like and so I have this weird relationship with the record where I'm still trying to get on its wavelength, but broadly speaking, I'm pretty positive. And I mean, that's only in terms of the mixing. In terms of the songwriting itself, I'm overwhelmingly positive. Like, I can't dispute anything more can said. The songwriting here is great. I will say I don't particularly care for The Shortest Straw that much, and I think that the "oh-wee-ohs" in Frayed Ends of Sanity sound corny as shit. But that's not even in the song for very long, so it doesn't really matter. I also
And
I don't
it's
know.
the only reason that it might be my least favorite track if I have such a thing.
No, Morgan, if you shouted out Harvester of Sorrow or not, but I really love that song. I think that's one of my favorite pieces here.
Yeah, I didn't have much to say about it other than it's fucking great.
Yeah.
So
yeah, but like I said, I like the aspects of this album that give you something that you haven't quite gotten from Metallica before, like the kind of really ugly spirit of Dyer's Eve, and or the kind of the tragic balladry of One that feels a little bit more kind of just horrific than their previous attempts at that kind of thing. Like it's just, it has this real quality that stays with you in a very unique way.
the album's just straight up scary at points.
Definitely.
Like, it's just like unnerving to listen to.
I do think, though, as well, if I have another critique of it, it's that it may be, I may just pull a Jake on Master of Puppets here and say that it may just be a bit too long. But, I don't even know what I'd cut. I mean, I guess I'd cut Shortest Straw and Frayed Ends of Sanity, but like, or even one of them, because I think around 8 tracks like the last few records would be satisfying. But it's not like a nitpick that really takes a lot away from the record for me. It just is there during the experience. I think the first 4 songs are basically close to perfect. And yeah, very, very good album. Great even.
Yeah.
Silence in the chat.
I guess I will fill that silence. I'm all for that. So I haven't been very specific with my feelings for the albums preceding this point, because I feel they are very easily summed up as like, it's just awesome. It's just awesome. Like, I can just very quickly get to the point with those albums. And I'm going to say this right off the bat, just so this review doesn't come off as like negatively tinged. I think this is a great album. It's just from this point on, these albums, I think, become increasingly more interesting to talk about, because the band is leaving from this kind of normal baseline, almost as it were, with their first 3 albums, where things were relatively functional, and now they've fallen into kind of a disorder, but that's a long ramble for later on. So, as mentioned, Blackened is a fantastic opener. The decision to reverse that opening guitar line is possibly one of the most genius ideas in all of metal. It's so instantly entrancing. There's something that's not quite right about it, but in a way that it's haunting and encapsulating. And just the fact that then the song that follows is one of the darkest things Metallica have put out, just about a nuclear holocaust, ostensibly, wiping out all years of human history and everything that's preceded that point. And then we have to build from that with the song And Justice for All, which has just this striking chorus of The Ultimate in Vanity. I will have to look up the exact wording of this chorus, because
I can offer some aid.
If you can, please. Wait, no, I've got it. The ultimate insanity, exploiting their supremacy. I can't believe the things you say. I can't believe the price you say. Nothing can save you. Justice is lost. Justice is raped. Justice is gone. Pulling your strings. Justice is done.
Some Swan
is-
shit right there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but it is a statement that is so...
Just imagining
Perfect.
Lulu with Michael Gira now.
What would even be different? Like,
Oh,
genuinely.
It would be better.
Fair.
and longer.
Yeah. Oh my god, I so
not
want
maybe.
that now.
Well, you know what's so
Definitely.
funny about that, just to continue this brief diversion, is that I do have a Swans comparison in my Lulu review.
That is not surprising in the slightest. It
It
makes a whole lot of
sense.
Anyway,
But yeah.
continuing with this album.
Yeah.
These two songs, I think, together are the ultimate statement of just the mindset Metallica's members were in at this point with the death of Cliff Burton, and obviously the some of his last ever words being used on "To Live Is to Die," just being incorporated in that, and just a way that is not really gut-wrenching when you first hear it, and it just seems like some weird ramble, but when you get the context for that, it becomes so crushing. And I feel that is, to the grander point Morgan was making, that this album works best in the context of knowing what is happening around this point in Metallica's evolution. And that being said, I think the kind of A side of this album, from Blackened to One, is pretty fantastic, even if Eye of the Beholder is not quite to the standards of those other three songs. And I think it's on the B side, as it were, where this album kind of shows the prevailing kind of, not, I guess, trend of like
I thought
what
you
I
were gonna
tend to
say.
not
I thought
like
you were
about
gonna say. I thought you were gonna say it's on the B side where this album shows its ass. I was gonna
That's
be.
some
was gonna-
fucking perfume genius open my ass shit right there.
close my ass. Close. I
Full
didn't.
circle.
That was
Full circle.
sir.
Sorry, you were saying.
Morgan.
But I think it's more with my issue with a lot of Metallica's stuff from this point on, in that they front load their records with their best ideas, and from now on, and not to the same extreme as later records, the B-side of these albums just kind of, or second halves, however you want to format it, they just kind of almost seem to coast along on the strength of the first half of the album, and that's not as big of a problem here, but it is emblematic of a problem that is to come, and that's about what I have to say, because everything else I was going to say has pretty much been said.
Yeehaw.
Jake. Ooh.
Okay.
About to come in with some hot dookie.
So,
You better do it. You better do it.
I first heard this album when I plowed through pretty much every Metallica album back when I was working at a drugstore and was just consuming all of the music that Morgan told me to consume. And eventually I came to Metallica, because of course I did. And I just sort of went through all the records over the course of a couple days. And I think that is the worst possible context you can listen to this album in. Because, of course, I didn't fucking know about anything in regards to Metallica. I didn't know who was fucking in Metallica. I was a dumb baby. Yes, this was only 3.5 years ago, but that's beside the point. This album upon revisiting it over the years, which I have just because this album undeniably does have problems, but also in that same vein, undeniably has some of the band's best material straight up, no questions or context needed. But revisiting it is difficult because I first heard it and I was just like, why does this not work for me like the other ones do? Because I feel like a lot of good shit is here and it's just not clicking with me. And then Morgan told me about the bass mixing and I was like, oh, well, that's stupid. So I tracked down a version of the album on YouTube with added bass, which did solve a lot of my problems in how robust those songs sounded. But it also was terrible in the sense that it made the sound quality dog shit because it was literally just layered over the track and like not mixed properly at all, even though it was there. So I listened to it that way for years just because I preferred it that way. And then, inexplicably, for this episode of the podcast, I did briefly revisit pretty much every Metallica album that like I knew I needed to go back to, not Ride the Lightning, Master of Puppets, or Kill 'Em All, though, just because I know my shit there. So I went back to this one, and I was like, okay, I know everything about the context of this record now. I'll give it a listen. And you know, it's going to sound like I'm talking out of my ass here, but I genuinely think this record is fantastic. Like, no bullshit, this record rules. For one very specific reason that has been brought up, but I don't feel has been accentuated enough, is the fact that the lack of bass on this album, while not immediate, while not clicking with you, while not doing or acting as if the Metallica albums that happened before it serves a purpose. You feel like someone is gone. You are listening to an incomplete product. No matter how they decided to mix it in at the end or with Jason Newsted coming in and helping, you are viewing a product that is mutated from its original form, and what it was meant to be will never exist, ever. And there's some sort of cursed quality about it that really makes it resonate. And when you think about it that way, and when you listen to it, and when you really do pay attention to the fact that this is, you know, as said, it's a pitch black record. But when you take all that into account, it sounds empty, it sounds dark, and it does sound industrial and progressive. These songs are long. They go through movements. It's like, I mean, one, for example, goes through like 3 really, really definitive actual movements, and it's remarkable to listen to. And I have a lot of the same issues that I used to have with it, in that I think that it's just not, you know, it's not the other records. But I came to the realization that if it was mixed perfectly, if this was the album that I, in many ways, wanted it to be when I was younger, what purpose does that serve? I have the last 3 Metallica albums, and they're mostly close to perfect, if not perfect. So if this just came along and was another one of them, what real standout reason would there be for it existing if not to act as a milestone of one of the most difficult parts of their life? And it is still my least favorite of this like golden era of their music, but I engage with it on a very different level now. So I hope that maybe I've been able to rectify that, just because for years it was been like a lesser album that I just didn't get. And I finally got it this time. And it felt good, even though I don't necessarily enjoy it more. I still respect it as a piece of art and as a monument to what happened and the pain they were going through, because I gravitate towards shit like that. I like when people take something that's really painful, really big, and really obvious, and they make it into their art, and they don't give a fuck about subtlety. They just put that shit out there and all its messiness. And this is, you know, it's clumsy. A lot of the song choices, like there's the oh shit. It's just like, what is this doing on here? Take it off. And there's other moments where I just feel like, did this song need to be this long? Or did this need to do this or that or whatever? But it all feels like it comes back to the point that they feel like they're lost. And I just really like albums that do that mean something on an emotional level that you can hear manifested. I lots of my favorite records are that way. I wouldn't put this above any of the albums that we talked about before. That said, I have finally really engaged with this in the way I think that it deserves to be engaged with. So no, I do not think this is mid. Though I tried to pull an August and see if I could subvert expectations. But yeah, it's a great album. It's just not an album that I'm going to go to when I want thrash metal. So,
Well, it's not fun to listen to, so who could really begrudge you that?
No, not at all. It has the same appeal as something like a Swans album, where it's like, I want to feel punished for an hour. I want this to be like to beat me.
Or like the Downward Spiral, like Morgan said.
Or like the Downward Spiral. It has that emotional potency. And then again, I still sympathize with my old self a little bit, because it's just like, yeah, without context, there's a lot of choices here that just don't feel like they're in service of anything. Yeah. But context is important. You can't separate it all the time. And sometimes it makes things better and different, or at least more appreciative. I am at a distance with this album that I'm not at with their other stuff. But I can acknowledge its greatness in a unique way, and it serves a very definitive purpose, and I like that about it, even if I think that The Shortest Straw shouldn't be on that album, but whatever.
Well said. Overall, I like what you
said. Except that last little bit about The Shortest Straw.
No, but I like what you said about the emptiness of the mix, like being purposeful, or at least like having a positive effect.
Yeah, feeling like someone is gone, like there's just no better way to channel that than with a void of empty sound.
I'm all but positive that was Lars's intention with the mixing.
Which is exactly why I think that the way this record should be heard is in its original form.
Yes, that's this. And this was the first time I listened to it like that too.
Yeah,
and I got that cassette from the 80s.
Yeah, I listened to the remaster whenever it's on Spotify. Not that it makes all that much of a difference, but I also have the vinyl, which it is a reissue, but it was reissued before the remaster. So I still have it in its original form, which despite all its shortcomings that you may throw at it, I really wouldn't change it all that much.
So yeah, favorite.
It's complicated and messy, but that's why it's
yeah.
Okay, well, let's do reverse again. I'll go first. Just to steal the spotlight again. My three favorite tracks are 1, Blackened, and Dyer's Eve. Well, that's a really hard choice, but I'm gonna have to go with those. My least favorite track is Shortest Straw, and I'm gonna give this album 9 out of 10.
I like it.
That is you, Morgan.
Yeah, it is. I'm just trying to find my notes. There it is. Okay.
Going up
we know what you're going to give it, so.
Well, yeah. My three favorite tracks in order from 3 to 1 are To Live Is to Die, 1, and Blackened. And my least favorite is No. Finally, that's the last album in this B-sides where I can say that I don't have a least favorite. So that's something, I guess.
We are crossing a threshold.
Oh, no.
And once again, finally, the last album that I will give this rating on this B-sides is a 10 out of 10.
10 out of 10.
So, my three favorite tracks are the same as Tyler's, and my least favorite track is the same as Tyler's, and I'm going to give this album a 7.5. But I'd like to re-listen to it after this discussion because I have the feeling it could go up.
Understandable. Have a nice day.
I will
Give it
keep
an
it
8.
at that for now.
Give it an 8.
My three favorite tracks are Blackened, 1, and I'll shout out Harvester of Sorrow as being pretty fucking rad. Least favorite, Shortest Straw, and I will say that this album improved by 2 points upon re-listen, so it is a light 8 out of 10.
Jake's all about the 8s today, and Morgan is all about the 10s.
No longer, though.
No longer.
No longer.
Well, yeah. Okay, so
What? You're not giving the Black Album a 10?
Well,
Huh?
interesting
Free.
thing, interesting bit of segue is that like one was quite commercially successful, was it not? Like it did well on like
very.
MTV and stuff, and so
One of
there
their most
was
popular
a
tracks.
precedent
their
for
first
what
music
happened
video.
next. There was a precedent for what happened next in their career that Morgan will inform us on.
Yeah, so it's at this point with the release of the Black Album that Metallica stops being one of the biggest bands of all time and pretty much just becomes the biggest band of all time, or at least at the time. Enter Sandman is to this day one of the most played songs ever on anything, on any format. If you turn on your rock radio and leave it on for 12 hours, I guarantee you will hear Enter Sandman at least once. It's the success of this album really can't be overstated. I think it's like the 25th highest selling album ever. It's
highest selling metal crossover album, I believe, too.
Yeah. It's just things explode at this point over MTV, on touring, on the radio. Metallica at a certain point, this is where Metallica stops being, well, doesn't stop being, obviously, but becomes less of a band and starts evolving into a brand in and of itself.
Yep.
It's heavily commercialized from this point on. And that's not to make a crack about the music itself, because when I am making a crack at the albums to come, you will know it. This certainly is a more commercial effort from Metallica. It leans less into thrash metal and more into just straight up heavy metal and hard rock. To varying results. Although I definitely would say, if I can just go ahead and jump into the review, if anyone's not opposed.
Please.
Yeah, go ahead.
My thoughts on this record are positive overall, but and especially in comparison with the records that come after, this really does fall positively for me. That said, I think it's easily the least compelling thing the band have come out with up till this point.
Yeah.
Everything aside from production, which is objectively seen it as a step up from And Justice for All at this point. But everything else, in my opinion, is kind of a step back. Compositions are less complicated and musically dense. That's not to say that there isn't some incredible musicianship on display on this album, because there totally is. But things are a bit simpler from here on out. And this starts here.
Yeah, I think what it reflects as well is clearly that the band were growing bored with a particular template of thrash that they had, because they've still got thrash incorporated on this record. But I mean, personally, I think even though I don't like this record as much as the ones that come before it, I think that conceptually, in terms of like what they were envisioning and the idea behind it, I think it's kind of a smart move, because there is a lot of potential crossover appeal to their sound, and they do capitalize on that in a lot of places here. And really, I think the only weaknesses of this record is not that like there's really shit stuff on it, just that like not everything is consistent as like the highlights are. And so like I don't think that Metallica going pop was like I mean you could, I guess it is a sellout in a sense, but like I don't think it's a bad thing. Like I think that it makes sense, and I think that it was probably kind of a smart move, because when you push the thrash sound as far as they did on the last couple records, like how do you push that forward? Like where do you go from there? You can, if you have
You
a
make
particular.
Lulu.
You can, like, if you're in a particular, this just isn't these people in this band just aren't the right people to take that sound further. They just don't really have it in them, which is not necessarily, to be mean or anything, but like,
So not really like a dig at them. Like getting more complicated than And Justice for All is like, can you even do that?
yeah,
Blatantly masturbatory.
and I think
Yeah.
as well, like the production on this, like, is very good, and it suits what they're like. It's incredibly well produced for what it wants to be. Like, I mean, say what you will about Bob Rock, and my understanding of Mr. Rock is from watching Some Kind of Monster, that he's more like of a backseat producer, really, but that generally his inclinations are towards making a sound as friendly as possible, which is hilarious considering that he produced Saint Anger.
Robert Rockert.
Yeah, but anyway, I do think that in terms of what the band are going for here, in terms of the decision to push in this direction, it not only makes sense, that I think it's smart, and that where it falls short is just in the band's own, I think, maybe not enough time was really spent, or not enough diversity in the songwriting. And again, like, it gets into this thing where, like, the consistent overwhelming issue with Metallica generally from this point onwards is that they just don't know how to cut the records down and make them really tight. They don't seem to have any interest in doing that. And I guess the more their career goes on, the more it seems to reflect inflated ego. And I guess their success kind of amplifies that. So it really cannot be overstated how much this record, and even though I know the next two records are going to be contentious, I do think that even they could be substantially improved just from considerable slashing of the material. Like, just that's really the only issue with this album, I think, is there's just some superfluous material on it. But I'll let you guys do your reviews, because I mean, I actually want to talk about the songs I like. The songs I really like, and they're not really like deep cuts, I'll be honest.
I mean, I wouldn't expect them to be, because the deep cuts on this album are the most boring thing on planet Earth.
I was gonna say.
Yeah, I mean, they're not bad, and I would say that they are worse. They're better than like some of the deep cuts on Load and Reload, at least. Like,
oh, definitely. That's a low bar.
But they do kind of, I do feign to remember them. Anyway.
Yeah, no, I do agree that easily the biggest problem this album has is that it's just too much. There's just too much of it, even down to certain songs being needed to be kind of edited. This definitely is a credit to just how absurdly overplayed it is. But I am not much of a fan of Enter Sandman myself.
Fair enough.
It's just everywhere, all the time. There is no escape. And I will say, it's a good song. But even without the overplay factor inherent in there, it is easily like a mid to low tier Metallica single. I'm not crazy about that song. But that said, I think songs like Through the Never, Jesus, I have dementia. I'm gonna have to
That's
look at
my
the track
job.
listing. Yeah, well,
Is one of them by chance The God That Failed?
that is one of them. I do like that one.
Yes.
A good deal. Where'd it go? God damn it.
God damn it, Bobby.
God That Failed, I think, is a song that's kind of like, topically resonant and moving, but doesn't really stand out for me as a song. But
no,
I can't fault it too badly. Like, it's fine.
Also, the fact that this is the Metallica problem from here on out, where on every album, James Hetfield has to write Dyer's Eve again.
That's valid. That's a good point.
Yep.
It basically is what it is.
Well, and he also does from this album on, at least, he makes a version of The Unforgiven like 6 times.
Oh, come on.
Quite literally.
Quite
Yeah,
literally.
And it's
Even though that is a fantastic song, maybe even I think the album's best.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was going to say that.
Absolutely.
I don't want to interrupt Morgan's review, though, because he was...
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not like that stopped you so far.
Discourse.
That is an interesting point you raised, because The Unforgiven is my least favorite track on the album.
On the whole album?
Always thought that was weird. Always thought it was weird.
And it's fine. It's fine. It's just them trying to do Fade to Black again, and it is nowhere near as good. It just doesn't come off quite as strong at all. And just go on.
No, I mean, they're definitely doing a ballad, but I don't really think it's that much of an attempt at a fade to black. Like, it's got a really nice Western twang to it, which that song doesn't have. And the melody just feels instantly classic on that song. Like, you feel like you're listening to a classic song straight away. It captures the emotional feel of their earlier records, even though it's like totally divorced from them sonically. It's more dirgy and filled with hooks, and there's vocal versatility on the track too. Like, James is not just in his like James is really showing his pipes on this one, and it's good. I love it actually. I don't know if it's my favorite, but yeah,
top 3 for me.
At least top 3, yeah.
Well,
Definitely.
bully for you all. I blame Nickelback's existence on that song.
Yeah, how's it fucking feel to be bullied by the 3 other people here?
Yeah, bitch.
Anyway, The Unforgiven isn't even the best ballad on the album, because that goes to Nothing Else Matters, which is pretty much
Okay, yep.
a fantastic song throughout.
The best.
Again, overplayed as it is.
Every song on this fucking album's overplayed.
Yeah.
Yes.
I enjoy Sad But True and Wherever I May Roam, but again, due to the radio, I could go my whole life without ever hearing them again. I do think the album is rather strong, but its biggest failing is that there's just too much of it, and the excess that it presents is just pretty forgettable.
I think though it's complicated though, because like the idea of this album, of like the Metallica crossover album being this kind of like big gigantic thing, I think is kind of cool. An idea like making your crossover album be this awesome double album sort of thing. Like, I get what they were trying to go for. It's just that they needed someone they needed a better producer, honestly, or a more honest producer, saying like, you can do better with these songs if you're gonna do something like this.
Yeah,
pretty much.
Good album. Unforgiven. That's hell. That's my piece.
Wow. Okay, I guess.
You dissed Orion earlier. I don't want to hear it from you.
You dissed Orion earlier. Yeah, see, that's how it feels. Fuck off. Anyway, the Black Album.
I feel nothing.
It's
same.
It's I guess if I can say anything to the band's credit, it's that if you're gonna follow And Justice for All with something that just isn't that, this was probably the best way to do it, just because you're following up your deliberately most inaccessible dark record with your most popular commercial album, and that ends up being a blessing and a curse, in that this album, the modus operandi for it is that it is designed to be successful, and in that vein, it's like, yeah, a lot of these songs are super immediate. They're catchy. I like them. They're a bit less complicated, but that's fine. Every band can do that. But it also results in trying to put out a lot of material and then ending up with a bunch of mid-as-hell cuts. And a lot of cuts that overstay their welcome. Like, Wherever I May Roam, why is this song 7 minutes long? Why? It does not need to be. I don't understand.
I think it's in the top half of the songs on the record.
It totally is.
It's a fine song. I just don't know why it's 7 minutes long, and I feel like I could say that for at least 5 more songs on this album.
Sure.
But it contains many highlights. I don't dislike it. I don't even think it's really that mid. It's just that I don't have strong feelings on Enter Sandman because it is so overplayed. It's just like, to this point, I listen to this album and I hear static. I hear nothing. It's just like, yes, I have heard every lyric to this song 400 times over the radio and in commercials or in movies or whatever the fuck. So yeah, it's fine. I do think that the refrain, or at the ending of when he says off to Never Neverland, I'm just like, dude, shut the fuck up. That's stupid.
Off to Never Neverland.
That's like, this is when James has reached full peak parody on this album, and that's not to say it's bad. It's just the most imitatable he's ever been.
This is
which
this is even before you get to the album that opens with "Hey, my bitch."
I would nominate the most imitatable that James Hetfield has ever been to the opening track on Reload, which, give me fuel, give me fire, give me down, which is.
I would personally say the entirety of Death Magnetic, but that's for later.
Yeah. Honestly, on a track-by-track level, I kind of agree with everything Morgan said. I will say I'm quite fond of The God That Failed just because of how personal and dark that song is in relation to his mother. That's just a very Metallica thing to express, like just the helplessness of losing someone you love and watching them wither away and struggle in this. It reminds me a lot of the dual parts Wings for Marie by Tool on 10,000 Days in that respect, and that it's just kind of open heart grieving in a dirge song form, so that it's kind of hard not to feel some feelings. And there's also Nothing Else Matters, which is my favorite song on the album. And admittedly, I've listened to covers of this song that I prefer just slightly more, just because it tends to make things a bit more subtle, which gives the song more of an identity than it does here. But then there's also songs like My Friend of Misery. I'm just like, what does that song fucking sound like? What is this song? Can you tell me what the chorus is? Give me lyrics. Give me... My friend of misery. Give me lyrics. Give me fire. Give me that which I desire.
I was just about to do that. Thank you.
Well, there are also like bangers, sort of like the anthemic "Don't Tread on Me," which is like pretty fucking like goes hard.
Easily the worst song on the album, in my opinion.
Not for me. That's My Friend of Misery. But like, and Sad But True's fine. But I find that to be a very weakly written track on here.
I just want to chime in and say that I love Sad But True. I never had like the radio exposure to me that Enter Sandman and Nothing Else Matters did, but I think it might be my favorite song on the album. I really love the riffs on that song. It's fine. It's nice.
I think it's kind of cheeky, but I think that's kind of the appeal of it.
Yeah, I certainly like it more than Enter Sandman.
It's fun.
A good time. That's all that really can be said.
Yeah.
You know?
But yeah.
Especially compared to what came next.
Anyway, my thoughts on the Black Album, just generally. I think that it doesn't quite live up to the promise of the Blueprint, and it doesn't.
That album was released like
It doesn't
10
quite
years
go back
later.
to how good Jay sounded on Reasonable Doubt either.
I hate that I knew you were gonna fucking say that as soon as you said Blueprint. I was just like, this motherfucker is gonna talk about Jay-Z.
Even though it does have the biggest single in 99 Problems, I do feel that the Black Album
You're
is
just gonna
also
keep going with it.
lacking in a lot of areas in terms of compared to what would come before and even what would come later with albums like I guess maybe not.
Reasonable Doubt.
That was the first Jay-Z album.
Oh,
But yeah,
I just named one.
I've basically already said everything I want to say about this Metallica album, so I'll leave it to.
There's not a lot to say about it.
All right. I mean, I've got a comparison that I think is pretty. Another album that I think is a pretty direct comparison in terms of what they're trying to do and how
Is
it
Fair
lands.
self-title.
No,
Can you imagine?
it is
Hey.
It's gonna be
the
some stupid
Clash's
shit.
Combat Rock,
Oh,
which
okay. No, that is a good comparison.
I would not disagree.
It is an album coming off of like kind of one of Metallica and the Clash's grandest statement up to that point, Sandinista being a like 3-hour long epic full of indulgences and weird non-mainstream ideas, as was One, as we have established, and Combat Rock and Metallica are both of these bands' fifth albums, and they are trying to definitely significantly scale back the experimentation and turn up kind of this mainstream appeal. And I think that's, to me, and it's also interesting that both Combat Rock and this album have 12 songs and also affect me in very similar ways in that they both have definite highlights, but the radio singles on that album, such as Rock the Casbah and Enter Sandman, have just been so overplayed.
The Clash is Enter Sandman.
I was gonna say,
Yeah.
damn it.
That they've just become kind of static white noise to anyone.
Well, no, Rock the Casbah is an amazing song. I would say the Enter Sandman of that album is Should I Stay or Should I Go?
That's, I think that's an even better comparison. I think you're right there.
And the
I think-
Sad But True is Straight to Hell, because both those songs fucking rule.
And they both
Good take.
started careers
Huh?
because of the MIA sample, MIA sample for Straight to Hell.
Yeah, she sampled Straight to Hell in Paper Planes, that's right.
Oh.
Yeah, it was a joke because one of them didn't do that. But yeah, I mean,
My
first-
face when the comedy explainer comes on.
All I
First
know
half-
now is that I feel like I want the Kendrick Lamar's rap rock album that he's talked about to just be samples of the Black Album on every track.
yes.
Oh my
Please,
god,
you know,
fucking
We're starting to fall into the Fontaine's DC problem of talking about anything but the record at hand.
Yeah, I mean, you guys have said what there is to say. There's some good songs on here, but it just needed to be cut down.
Yeah.
Unlike the previous albums, it's good in a way that isn't really that exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Okay.
Should we go into our favorite tracks and ratings then?
Yeah, let's do that.
I
Okay,
suppose.
Jake, you first.
My three favorite tracks are Nothing Else Matters, The Unforgiven, and The God That Failed. And least favorite is My Friend of Misery. And sad that I couldn't include Through the Never. But yeah, I give this a light 7.
All right. My three favorites are The Unforgiven, Through the Never, and I guess I kind of like the cheekiness of Holier Than Thou, so I'll throw that on there. And my least favorite would have to be Of Wolf and Man, which is just
Oh yeah.
complete fart in the wind throwaway song.
I don't remember a thing about that song.
I can't tell you a lyric of it. So yeah.
You could have told me that was on Reload and I would have believed you. I just okay.
Okay. Morgan.
What's your rating,
Better than
August?
anything.
Oh, my rating of 6.
Okay.
My 3 favorites are Through the Never, fucking Holier Than Thou. I enjoy that song quite a bit, and Nothing Else Matters. And my least favorite is still The Unforgiven, though it is worth noting that isn't, it's not by like a wide margin or anything. It just falls into the rest of the mid tracks on here. And I'm feeling a light 7.
Okay. My favorite tracks are Sad But True, The Unforgiven, and Nothing Else Matters. My least favorite track, and I'm genuinely shocked that this is no one else's least favorite track, as I really sticks out like a sore thumb how much I don't care for it, Don't Tread on Me. But yeah, that is my least favorite track, and I'm going to give this album a light 7 as well.
And let it be known, the gap in quality between The Unforgiven and The Unforgiven 2 and 3 is large.
I mean, I feel like that can be said by everything from here on out, actually.
Oh, God.
Well, there will be some variation though, but
You are not.
it will be fun to talk about, I think, because it's
Oh man, that's going to be a
I
gauntlet.
don't know about... It'll be fun to listen to. It won't be fun to do.
Gosh.
Listeners, tell us what you think of the first 5 Metallica records. Which ones are your favorite? What do you think of Morgan's hot take that Justice for All is the best one? And tell us what you think, and tell us what you think or are hoping to get from the rest of this discography discussion, which will be up eventually. I'll decide on a release date once we've shot it, I think. But yeah, well done. Rock Over London.
Yeah.
Rock
on
over the
Chicago.
Casbah.
Megadeth.
Dave Mustaine.